Hello, everyone. This is the Crusader Historian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about an event that happened March 17, 2018. And this is an earlier video that I had in the works, but I still find it as relevant. I still think this is important because, well, I find this as particularly, disturbing. Today we're going to be talking about the Holy Cross Crusaders. Holy Cross is a Catholic college founded in the 1800s. It takes place, it's in Massachusetts, I believe. M.A., Worcester, Massachusetts, I believe. I think so. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong down below. The various initials of the states are confusing. Well, anyway, Holy Cross Shield, Holy Cross coat of arms. It looks pretty cool. Well, as I said before, their mascot is the Holy Cross Crusaders. And the Crusaders are pretty good in various sports like football, hockey, and basketball. So this is not one of those I would say it is like any other colleges. Like, it has various sports teams, and it has a cool mascot. I mean, Crusaders, in our culture at the very least, in fantasy is a holy warrior fighting against demons, devils, undead, and all sorts of other evil beings. And I will say, it is quite a cool mascot to have. A heroic holy knight fighting against evil. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anymore. Feel free to pause this to read through this article. If you can't read it, that's fine. I'm going to be going through it little by little and expressing my thoughts about it. Feel free to pause now. Okay, now that you're back, let's get started. What began as a crusade to rid the school of an offensively titled student newspaper dubbed the Crusader in 1955 became an attack on the mascot, also the Crusader. Aside from concerns that the paper's title was the same as a newspaper published by the KKK, students, spurred to outrage by a letter to the editor signed by 48 faculty members, said the newspaper's name also promoted Islamophobia, especially after the 2016 election. Okay, first I have a question. If the KKK had a newspaper titled The Crusader, shouldn't Holy Cross sue the KKK for copyright violations or taking their name without permission? But then again, I don't know. But anyway, this Islamophobia, especially after the 2016 election, is likely, if not firmly, having to do with a policy idea that our current president of the United States, Donald Trump, brought forward. He talked about banning Muslims from entering the United States from various troublesome areas like Syria, Iraq, and places like that until various safeguards are put in place. Many people thought it was common sense, or at least had a good idea, but just as many people were outraged by this whole idea of Islamophobia. Let's take a look at Islamophobia for a second. A phobia is an irrational fear of something. So Islamophobia means an irrational fear of Islam. Alright, let's take a look at this, why many people would actually be on board with this plan. Let's take a look here. And this is there has been a rise of anti-Semitic attacks and calls to death to Jews that have plagued Europe in recent months. And these events are hardly new in France. Muslims gunned down 4 people after a standoff. Yes. In 2007, a Jewish woman was killed by a Muslim neighbor who pushed her out of a window, and a Jewish family was robbed and held hostage for money. And these heinous string of attacks on French Jews, mostly but not exclusively by Muslims. So, yes, there are non-Muslims involved, but most of them are done by Muslims. And this is not anything new. In 2006, this also happened. And this isn't unusual. This happens in Sweden as well. And in December, Muslims hurled cocktails at Jewish teens at a synagogue party. Now, this article was written in 2018. According to this, anti-Semitism attacks done by mostly Muslims have been increasing since Muslims started immigrating into Europe. It skyrocketed since the refugee crisis. I would say this is not an irrational fear of Islam. This is a concern that should be at least looked at seriously. Wondering, if Islam is a religion of peace, then why hasn't it been taught in the Islamic world? And when most men from the Islamic world come here, instead of getting jobs and finding a way to support the economy, improve that, and work alongside other peoples of the book, why are they attacking Jews? That's a question that needs to be asked. The mascot is one of the most important things to the school because it represents who you are, said sophomore Matthew Wolf. While some argue the Crusaders are a direct link to the Jesuit school's religious identity, others wonder if the mascot aligns with the school's 21st century values. Campus Reform reports the mascot's defenders, however, pointed out the historical reality that the Crusades were a conflict between expanding Muslim empires and declining Christian powers that had already been fighting each other over land for centuries, arguing that the contemporary inclination to disparage the Crusaders overlooks the fact that both sides committed atrocities. Now, this is Chief Joseph. He was a leader of Indian tribes during Indian wars during the early 1800s, I believe, and he said this quote, "A man who does not love his father's grave is worse than a wild animal." And I feel like all of these sophomores, these students, are hating their ancestors, blaming their ancestors for doing what they thought was right in their current time period. The Crusaders thought they were fighting for justice. They were fighting for defense over their beliefs. Something that I would say is similar to 21st century values. I would like to think that students at the universities would love to protect values of that their ancestors and them commonly had. Justice, the rule of law, all the things that the Judeo-Christian world has given us. And yes, both sides committed atrocities, but the Crusaders were actually a response to centuries of unprovoked Islamic aggression. And you can see it happen. Islam exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula, crushed the Persians to the east, smashed northern Africa and parts of Spain of the Islamic Empire, and reached as far into Tours. So, yes, the Christians and the Muslims were fighting each other, but there has not been an organized effort. That came later when Emperor Alexius sent a letter to Pope Urban for help. This had been the central unofficial game plan while the Crusaders of Europe dealt with a lot of stuff they were working on. They trusted on the Byzantine Empire to the east to keep a lid on things. But the Byzantine Empire lost a battle, lost a few battles, and sent a plea for help. And Pope Urban II felt moved to answer their call for aid. He condemned the knights of Europe from fighting each other while saying he said that our fellow Christians suffering out in the east, our fellow brothers and sisters, we must go to their aid. So, what does this mean? Well, the Crusades were an act to save Christians. There were also Christians being attacked on their way to the Holy Land. And to the critics of the people who are condemning the people that are supporting the mascot, I wish to tell you this. Many of you celebrate Americans for freeing the world from Nazi occupation. But are you aware that Americans committed atrocities against the Germans? One of my friends talked about how his grandfather saw 4 American soldiers raping German women for sport. And I have a question to ask you. Does that prevent the fact that our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers risked their lives to put Nazis down? Just something to think about. The school's president, Fr. Philip Borogas, I'm going to not pretend to know what that is pronounced. Feel free to let me know below. Nevertheless, announced in September that he had convened a working group to explore whether the Crusader monkey or mascot are appropriate or inappropriate representations of the college given our mission, values, and identity. From the Worcester Telegram, in a letter to alumni, students, faculty, and staff, the Reverend, that's probably what it is, Borogas, said the Crusader Knight, which adorns much of the college's paraphernalia inevitably ties us directly to the reality of the religious wars and the violence of the Crusades. Let me make this clear again. I also have a video talking about the First Crusade. I encourage you to take a look at it on my channel. If you look at this, the Crusader Wars were a reaction, a delayed reaction, but a reaction nonetheless, done by Christians in response to Islamic aggression. It was an act of retaliation. And I wish to point it out. All wars were violent back then. All wars are still violent. And remember, Alexius and the Byzantines asked their Western brethren for help. This was done as a common cause to save Christians and allow them to safely travel to the holy sites. That's all this war was about. It wasn't about wealth or money, forcible conversions of Muslims. They more or less left the Muslims that they conquered alone. And believe it or not, but many Muslims actually liked living under Crusader rule. They had more leeway living under Crusader rule than under the rule of Sharia law. In fact, several Muslim historians at the time complained about it. This imagery stands in contrast to our stated values, he said. As in the president, over the coming months, the college will gradually phase out the use of all night-related imagery. Well, I wish to give you guys all a gift. The night-related imagery of the Holy Cross Crusaders. Okay. I wish to tell you guys this. The Crusaders were an act to go to the aid of the helpless. The Crusaders' motto is "Together we will." If the people at Holy Cross have no desire to go to the aid of the helpless, to rescue their brother and sisters that are in trouble, then it's perhaps best for them to not have the Crusaders as a mascot. And for those who still honor it, always remember to still have Crusader pride. And remember that our ancestors did what they had to do, which they felt was right at that particular time. They went to the rescue. They did as John chapter 15 verse 13 said, "Greater love hath no man than this, a man lay down his life for his friends." I thank you all, and I wish you a nice day.